Do you like?
There's very little you do I don't like, or that I will admit while we're recording.
Okay, well that's fair. So, what
Yes.
episode is this? Do you know? Do you keep track? Do you care? 25.
Oh yeah, 25.
We can rent a car.
My birthday's the 25th of the month, so I need to remember that. We can rent a car, right? 25 years old.
Yeah, stick with my joke before you.
Okay, sorry.
And in yours. Welcome to an all-new episode of Work in Progress with John Lane and Will Barfield. This podcast explores leadership traits under stress with a special guest each week. We use a simple and accurate OAD assessment to identify key personality traits or superpowers, as well as the shadow side, kryptonite traits that appear when we're under stress. As always, we'll have some pod banter, shameless plugging, and we'll even let our guests talk for a bit. Of course, no humble brags. Welcome to the show. Hello, everybody. It's
Hello.
John. Welcome to Work in Progress with John Lane and Will Barfield. Will, how are you, brother?
Oh, I'm doing good. I like that you mixed up the intro a little bit there.
Yeah. Well, we were on a podcast yesterday with Pete, and he's going to be on ours soon too. And I realized he had the same tone, welcome everybody, and all that nonsense. And I don't think he stole mine. I'm not saying he did. I am saying that I thought I should change it up a little.
Oh.
Do you like?
There's very little you do I don't like, or that I will admit while we're recording.
Okay, well that's fair. So, what episode is this? Do you know? Do you keep track? Do you care? 25.
Oh yeah, 25.
We can rent a car.
My birthday's the 25th of the month, so I need to remember that. We can rent a car, right? 25 years old.
Yeah, stick with my joke before you.
Okay, sorry.
And in yours. So that's good.
Had you written that joke down? Was that on that little pad thing?
Sort of. It's. You mean? Is it on the Remarkable?
Who still is not giving us
the
sponsorship
Remarkable
dollars?
Guys to sponsor us, and they have not reached the bait yet. But
you're good. Just keep talking about your stuff. It's like
we're gonna keep bringing it up. We're gonna keep bringing it up. So so 25. That's pretty impressive. I know at 20 we weren't very sure we'd get to 5. So 5 more is 25. That's kind of cool. But I think we should agree that anyone who's a guest 25 or earlier, we will call OG.
So Devin's an OG.
Devin's going to squeeze into OG.
Nice.
But also, you guys have figured it out now. Like, there's no slip up.
It's very low risk. You can see my mic. Does this look professional or less so?
Well, if you remember, you were talking about the podcast we were recently on. Pete's mic was in the mix. So, yeah.
Pete's a better man than me. I'm not going to do that. So, okay. Well, we have Devin here. Oh, I know, Will, I'm jumping into your world. What do you notice about my shirt?
It's a collared golf shirt.
Mostly, yeah. I usually go with the something more professional looking.
But you usually go long sleeve or maybe the vest.
Look at that. Yeah, no vest.
It's Carol. She doesn't like the vest look, right? Or is it just the vest with a t-shirt she doesn't like? What is it?
She doesn't like vest and a t-shirt. She does like vest and a long sleeve shirt, but it's too hot for that around here.
It is. Well, you look dapper.
Thank you. Because I'm John Lane.
And I'm Devin had something to say there.
Oh,
what's that, Mr. Kelley?
For God's sakes.
You're making me feel underdressed.
Oh, we're not making you feel underdressed. You're underdressed and you're noticing. There's a difference.
How about this? I'm wearing a golf shirt and basketball shorts, so I'm half nicely dressed.
I'm actually in short pants today too because I had to go out. I was out in Durham to. I was at Duke Sports Medicine. Hi, Duke Sport Medicine. Would you be interested in sponsoring a nonsense podcast? Let's just get in the recording. They did a good job of me, though. I was glad to be there. I'm John Lane.
I'm Will Barfield.
And we are
a work in progress.
As always, we have a guest. Devin, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for including me, guys.
We're very happy to have you. How do you guys know each other? Tell our listener.
I guess Will and I have known each other for some time, and I don't even know how we originally got connected. But
Preston.
Okay.
Explain who's
Prometheus
Preston.
Group.
Preston Campbell, yeah.
They went to Elon together, didn't you?
Yes.
So,
and that's probably a good 8-10 years ago. It's been a while.
Got to be. Yeah. Preston just thought we would, get along and should do some networking because of, what I do for a living and what Devin does for a living. And
was he
Preston is just good people. And
he was horribly
Devin
wrong.
and I have been friends ever since. Or I've been Devin's friend. I don't know. Well, or I've just tried to appeal to be his friend ever since.
Yeah. Well, he stole your barbecue. We'll get to that later. Devin, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Devin Kelley, you told me to keep this short, so we'll start I was born in Middlebury, Vermont, and
I love Middlebury, Vermont.
Like 2 minutes per year.
Did you really were you really in Middlebury?
Yeah, I was born in Middlebury, Vermont.
I went to summer camp and worked there in colleges in Salisbury at Lake Dunmore, just down Route 7.
100%. So spent many a summer on Lake Dunmore. I had a fishing shanty in high school that fell through the ice because we didn't take it off fast enough.
Oh, no.
Very familiar with Lake Dunmore.
Awesome. Well, tell folks what you do for a living now.
So I now work for a company called Method Savvy. We're a marketing agency, marketing consultancy. Do all kinds of things on the marketing front, from kind of creative to analytics. But I run client services there, and that's a mix of kind of net new business and managing the relationships with our existing clients. So both a bit of kind of sales and business development, and making sure the customers that we do have are happy, well taken care of in our work with them.
Very nice. Well, I got to talk to you about that offline sometime. But it's great to have you here. Will, do you want to say anything to Devin before we get started?
No, just, he is a very gifted networker. He is always around town and at the right events, and he is a giver. So he's one that is always thinking about who can I connect and how can I make the community better.
I think we all have that in common.
I don't.
I pick up the slack for you.
I'm trying to, Well, let that joke go.
Thank you.
Next.
All right, well, let's get into this. So if you've made it this far and you've seen any of our previous shows, Will, have you watched any of our shows? I know you're on them, but do you ever watch them?
I have watched some of them, not all of them.
Okay. Amy watches.
Amy watches them very loyally. Mm-hmm.
I'm not pretty sure you don't watch, but anyway, those of you who do watch know that the topic we're going to talk about today is leadership traits under stress. And the way we get those leadership traits under stress is all of our guests go through the OAD assessment. It's super easy. It only takes like 5 minutes, and it's also really accurate. And from that, we derive the strengths and weaknesses. We cleverly rebrand them as superpowers and kryptonite. And we have a discussion, and we get into it, and that's what we're going to do now. So as we go forward, Will, what are you happy about?
I'm happy that Devin is in the cool kids quadrant with me as an architect.
Who else have we had? We've had Olivia. I don't want to name names and forget others, but we haven't had that many up there. It's kind of the lonely left. Well, and then there's the non-existent right, because we actually have one facilitator coming on soon, but we haven't had any yet, I don't think.
No, anyway, it's been builders the most, and then architects way behind that, and then we have sprinkling
a couple of experts and facilitators we're going to get to. So let's wrap up what this means. So in OAD, we have a nice 2x2. So generalists are on the top, specialists are on the bottom, socially oriented on the right, technically oriented on the left. Devin is, you can see my crack arrow there, is a technically oriented generalist. No, he is an independent generalist. We'll get there in a second. And Will, you're a developer, right?
Yes.
So slightly different, but everyone in that upper right is technically oriented generalist. I and many of our other guests have been socially oriented generalists in the builder quadrant. I would point to that, except our friends at haven't figured out how to give me a pointer yet. So I'm working on them.
You're working on them relentlessly.
I'm working on them hard. I had some poor guy, Benjamin, awesome guy, giving me a one-on-one tutorial for about an hour yesterday on their other products. So they're very nice. Very, 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 very nice. Will, ask Devin the question.
Mr. Kelley, how does it feel to have everything that's all about you compressed down into a two-dimensional table? Is that hard? on the ego or anything?
That seems about the right depth.
That's exactly what an independent generalist would say. Well, let's break it down.
John made
We'll
a point
go.
earlier, Devin, about the speed, right? And you're no rookie to assessments for work and other things. What did you think about the speed versus the accuracy of this when you took it and then you got the information from John that he's going to expound upon here?
Yeah, so it was super simple to walk through and kind of move through, and I think different than some other assessments that you can kind of tell there's an answer they're fishing for. It's pretty easy to go through and just be honest rather than thinking too much about it. But John did send me the assessment on a Friday afternoon at like 4:45, and then called it homework. So I generally didn't want to do homework over the weekend. So that's my one qualm with the
And that's really more with the executive producer than it is with OAD. Let's be honest with that. So, all right, well, let's break you down, sir. So, what makes you an independent generalist is the relationships between the four constructs of assertiveness, extroversion, patience, and detail orientation. So, your dominant trait, anything to the right of that little
red
mark up there,
little red meat
I
line.
can't get it there. We need a pointer, people. But assertiveness is your dominant trait. And we look at your assertiveness relative to your detail orientation. A is greater than D, so you're a generalist. And then we look at the relationship between your E and your D. D is greater than E. That makes you more technically oriented. That's a little inside baseball. But basically, you are an assertive guy who has a pretty good amount of patience, pretty good amount of detail orientation and follow through and structure, and is not particularly extroverted. And you need to probably work on that during the day as you're talking with clients. But that is who you are. You've already said it was fast and accurate, so we can state that for the case. And Will, why don't we get into some of the superpowers in kryptonite?
Yeah, so self-analysis time here, Devin. This is the generic readout for someone who is an architect up in our quadrant where the cool kids are.
Cool.
And as an independent generalist, let's look at the superpowers in kryptonite real quick here, and just touch on it lightly. Is there one of the superpowers that you noticed there that really speaks to you, or you agree or align with, or that others would say about you is spot on in that column?
So I think the conceptual one, like I get, I'm very much like ideas, probably not the follow through guy. So I think that like I love ideas, will bounce all around with them, but like it takes work, and it's taken some like discipline on my side to make sure that you get the follow through, you get the planning, you get the details done. So I think that like resonated from the top.
Well, and that I'm gonna stay in this column just for a second and make a point, John. Right, that task delegator, right? So Devin is one who probably is going to come up with the idea and then be excited to delegate that to other team members, not just because that's not his greatest strength, but also he is a leader who needs to empower others on his team.
Yeah, I definitely see that in the background. I'll also just say people who are generalists, and depending on how intense their generalist is, are really comfortable in ambiguity. And I think concepts typically come from ambiguity, and then they get drilled down into being more specific, not necessarily by the same person. So yeah, I think you're spot on with that.
How about kryptonite? Is there one of those that when the pressure's on or things are hard or stress is up that you agree with maybe more than even the others on there?
I think they can be uncommunicative at times, and also going back to kind of the previous slide and talking about kind of being how extroverted you are. I think a lot of people would, as you said, I do a lot of networking. I'm out a lot, but that's actually work. Like that's intentional. And I I'm very comfortable not communicating at times and like taking a break from, being the guy talking or the person receiving all the emails or, having to do all the communicating. So I thought that was interesting, and, would be interested in kind of learning some more about that, because while I can do many of the very extroverted things, it's probably not, I don't want to say natural, but probably not. It doesn't take work. It takes real effort to focus that direction.
And I bet after that, I mean, you go to a networking event and you have a couple beers and talk to people and say hey and catch up, and then I bet after that you are gassed, and you just need some time alone to kind of recalibrate.
I can go an entire weekend with talking to basically no one. I have plenty of friends during the week, right? And those are welcome weekends when it's quieter and there's less going on. So I think we all need that recharge time, but I think it's surprising sometimes to people that like people who are out a lot or communicate as part of their work life like need that time as much as anybody else.
Well, we're talking about kryptonite here in this sense. Yeah. So I get the need for recharge, but I will just say, when your mind, and again, this is why we're talking about leadership traits under stress, when your mind is telling you it's time to burrow in, and yet you've got teams, there's some crisis, there's some new clients, maybe things aren't going exactly the way you want and it's bumpy, how do you fight that superpower? Or sorry, how do you fight that kryptonite where a part of you just wants to rest and sort of shut off when you can't? And that's where we spend our time doing leadership development, because sometimes it doesn't matter what the leader wants. It matters what the team needs.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's a good question. I think the first thing that I try to do is just be really honest about like where I am in that. I think people on my team would not be unfamiliar with the fact that I generally tell my team and folks here that like by Thursday I'm running out of words. And
well, Friday, we have our pull quote, Will.
Yeah.
There aren't many left. So just being honest about like you can't be doing that all the time.
Right.
Is part of it. And I think the other thing that I've learned to be more disciplined about is being really cognizant of when I communicate, and that because of either my role in the company or the role I'm playing in a relationship, people feel like they have to respond, right? And being cognizant of the time of day that you're asking people questions, or do you need this response right now? And the fact that you can schedule things in Slack, schedule things in emails, like because you thought of it doesn't mean you have to say it, right? And that kind of like back and forth maybe feels productive because there's activity, but like you don't necessarily need that. So I think I've had to work hard to like govern myself, I guess, to say like, I don't need to communicate about this right now. You don't need to communicate about this right now.
Yeah. Scheduled send is a godsend.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you, because you're a thoughtful person, Devin, when you got John's feedback,
homework, let's say it,
notes, you overcame your grouchiness about the homework and you delivered high quality results to Mr. Lane so we could prepare him for the show. Take your time here, if you will, a little bit. Let's talk about these superpower, moments. And why did you make some of the notes that you did here? What was it about the superpower results or the strengths that OAD uncovered that inspired you to comment in the way you did?
Yeah. I guess often, as is the case with, structures like this, there weren't a lot of surprises, but it gave me a good structure to take some of the feedback I've received in different ways and like kind of tie that together or bundle that into these responses. So it was a helpful way to kind of organize some of that feedback into a productive way of thinking. So that's really what I tried to do here. And, probably not unsurprisingly, in many cases, the kind of upsides of the superpowers were, the downsides of the kryptonite.
Correct.
Any of these you want to dig into superpower wise here that you've noted things you uncovered here? Some of this stuff's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, happy to go as deep as you'd like in any of these. The first I've always found really interesting, and it's actually tough to find more, I guess, data or research on this. But I'm very quick with solutions. Like anytime a problem comes up, I can turn around to here's something we might do really, really quickly.
Right.
And what that's done for me in my career is that I think it's oftentimes put me in a position where people think I know what I'm talking about. When I don't, I'm just quick to offer a solution. And I actually had found some research on this that somebody had actually done some research with kind of groupthink and like decision making as teams, and found that the first solution that's offered to a team is more often accepted than one that may be better thought out or more logical or have more data supporting it. And it kind of is the logic behind leadership to some extent, that like if you're first to say let's go this way, more than likely people think you're right because you came up with it first and will start following. And I've been doing this for years and hadn't necessarily realized it. And it was helpful to realize that that was something that was being helpful to me in numerous different ways, but also being cognizant of that to say, hey, I don't always need to jump in with this solution right away. And it may give other people an opportunity to provide other solutions if I keep my mouth shut. So, I think there are certainly upsides of that. And then being aware of it helps you, kind of empower others to be able to, have their ideas better received.
Politely persistent.
I've been called politely persistent a number of times, mostly from a salesperson perspective. Yeah. But I like to think of that as a compliment. It's your job to be persistent in a sales role, but you need to do that in as productive a way as you can. And when I say productive, it's not about like what's the revenue number on the back end, but like these are relationships with real people, right? And you hope they have, or you have, their respect and understanding that like you have a role to play, they have a role to play. I'm not going to not reach out to you, but I'm going to make this as fun or as interesting or as painless as I can in the process, so that that relationship, if the opportunity arises, has an opportunity or has a chance to kind of flourish without kind of them being mad you've sent them emails for a number of years.
I like that.
How did we're going to hit this, but trailing from that, how did you end up in a business development and sales career for someone who is so naturally introverted?
It's a good question. I think when I was younger, I realized that there was a lot of value in networks, and then had to figure out what that meant for me. I remember being much younger and realizing that like a lot of people who got things got them because they had friends or acquaintances or whatever else that connected them to them. Yeah. And it didn't have to do with money necessarily. It didn't have to do with their role in a company or whatever else. It had to do with them knowing people who could make things happen, right? Like I've got a guy for that.
Yep.
And I think I've had to kind of train myself to say it is productive for you to have that too. And if again, like the whole extroversion thing is work, and I've had to kind of be intentional about that. I read a book probably in college called Never Eat Alone. And the lessons basically, everybody's got to eat, and it's more fun if you don't do it by yourself. So like use that as an opportunity to go make connections, spend time with people, and you never have to. No one's ever saying I'm not having lunch today, right? Like we're all always supposed to eat lunch, so like why not do it with me? And so I think that's kind of the genesis of it. And I may not even realize like the amount of energy it takes to keep that up over time, but I think that's the reason I ended up in a role like this, I guess.
That's great.
What was that a place that we used to eat lunch, Devin, where we cut the pizza with scissors? What was that place called? Is that still around?
Oh, Pompieri in Durham, yeah.
Yeah, that's good pizza.
I
So
love it.
kryptonite, shadow side, right, John? This is when pressure's on, or we're in uncomfortable situations, or we're forced out of our zone. You made some notes here, Devin, about your kryptonite. Let's look at these bullets a little bit. Anything there you want to comment on that really resonated with you, that led you to pin down these thoughts and send them back to Mr. Lane?
Yeah, I know John mentioned before the comfortable with ambiguity piece. And I would even go a little further on that. That I'm not only like comfortable with ambiguity, I find it uninteresting when things are like very straightforward and like the answer is very clear. Like it's uninteresting. Like someone's figured that out already. I doesn't hold interest for me. And I think that like I probably seek out ambiguity and enjoy being in that space. So it was interesting seeing it put that way. And I think probably a lot of people were like, oh, well, maybe that's the nice way of saying it. And I would actually like probably go a little deeper on that one. Let's see, anything else?
Well, you're saying because you're comfortable with ambiguity, others around you may not be, and you're willing to flip the page and go, well, that's an open question. Let's get to the next item. And others are like, whoa. What did we just agree to? Or why are we leaving it here? So is that where you're seeing like a disconnect between what you're comfortable with and maybe the rest of your team is?
Yeah, I think that's 100% the case. And, even in the way being comfortable with ambiguity is kind of written here, and that came from the assessment. I feel like that's the nice way of giving somebody feedback that may be more negative, right? Like comfortable with ambiguity is like, well, maybe they're not focusing on the things that are figured out or solidified. And I would lead into that even further. And I think that kind of gets into maybe the last bucket here and the facilitation piece. But I'm very comfortable saying like that is an unanswered question. We'll come back to it and move on. And also comfortable, saying we don't know. Right. So yeah, I think that's 100% true. And I think oftentimes when you do things like that, people are like, wait a minute, like we don't have an answer. How can we move on? Like there's lots of things we don't have answers to.
That is true. There's probably more questions than answers.
Yeah, there better be.
Do you find, Devin, with that piece right there, is that something that impacts you more, leadership to leadership peer level, or is that something that impacts you more when you're trying to manage down?
Both. It's definitely a challenge with people, particularly people who are earlier in their career. I could spend a lot of time on this, but like our entire kind of educational process, for the most part, is built on us knowing the answers to the questions that were asked. Most of us spend 15 years being told that's the way things work in school, high school all the way through college and further. And as you get into the working world and you find out that there isn't 100% grade you can get on every test because that's not how the world works, it becomes really challenging for especially young people to kind of unlearn that behavior. I think that also can be the case with folks in kind of leadership, especially people who are really focused on like accountability driven stuff. It can be really frustrating not to like have somewhere to point on things. Like that's a problem. Like something has to be done. Well, we're all tolerating a certain level of dysfunction kind of all day, every day, because we managed to verbalize this challenge doesn't necessarily mean something has to be done about it.
What's the old saying? Don't just do something, stand there.
Yeah.
Not every problem, and so we may be sort of circling that this is actually back to a superpower. So I want to hear some dirt from you in a minute, like scuffed knees. But there is this sense that not everything, not, you don't have, every time you see something, you don't have to like own it and pick it up and do something about it. There's a level of background noise that happens, and I think you put your finger on it. Companies or entities that have a culture of accountability, definitely good, right? But then there's this bit about you're measuring everything, and usually the things you're measuring are things that can easily be counted, like how many
Yep.
phone calls did a sales rep make? How
Yep.
many emails did they send out? And when you see differences in there, you're like, oh, this guy's not sending enough emails. Well, maybe he's sending fewer, but they're getting better responses, and his pipe is bigger than the guy who's hitting all his numbers.
Yep.
Is there a problem? Or let's say both are at quota. One seller completely nails all of their activity metrics, and the other is well below, but their pipeline and their closing and their ACVs and stuff are all equivalent. Is there a problem? I don't know. I think there's not a problem.
Yeah. Well, so the metrics that you pick to assess things have a huge impact on kind of the outcome that you're looking to drive. And in addition to that, the time periods in which you look to measure do as well. There's a great, I think it's a Forrester stat from a couple years ago that somebody went and kind of looked behind the curtain on all like enterprise software deals for the last 5 years or whatever. And something like 90% of them were closed in the month of December, right? And like, it's when everybody has maximum pressure to get things done by the end of the year. CFO is willing to give maximum flexibility on deal structure, and like budgets are most under pressure from the client side to like,
you got to spend your money or you don't get it next year.
Use it or lose it. Yep.
Yeah.
100%. And you're like, if that's just the way all these enterprise deals are happening, like what are we doing the other 11 months, right? Like,
I guess building pipeline. Yeah.
Yeah. Trade shows, golfing, whatever. But that kind of, if you chose to just look at quarter over quarter numbers, I'm sure those numbers look terrible for most of those salespeople for a Q1, Q2, and Q3. And so depending upon the lens you take in evaluating those activities, you could end up with really different conclusions there. And I try to be super cognizant of that and working with our clients on stuff. And I really don't spend much of any time thinking about those types of things, with our team in terms of like, are you doing the activity that equals the results? It's hard. Are you
laying the ground? What groundwork are you laying? So when we get to Q4, you're not frantic trying to get a deal in front of somebody. You're trying to then just like get it across the line, and you can't wait to start until Q4. Then you're screwed.
Yeah. And if you wait till Q4, you're probably screwed anyway, right? Like,
right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Devin, so really enjoyed that open conversation. As always, appreciate vulnerability when we have people on the show. That's what this is all about, is kind of a self-examination. Things that you gathered from the results, the generic, but also the deeper dive analysis you did on strengths and weaknesses, superpowers and kryptonite. Were there some things that you experienced, were reminded of maybe from prior, experience, going through assessments like this, stuff that you can apply to work professionally, all the things that are required from you every day? Did you carry away some knowledge here that can help?
Yeah. And I think at a high level, just the reminder, particularly for me, but I think in general that like the things that I am best at are very, very closely related to the things that I struggle with. And I think that's something that everybody has to kind of keep in mind. And frankly, I spend a certain amount of time struggling with to say, is this thing that I'm doing that seems to be working pretty well actually a negative, right? Like how many of the strengths actually are weaknesses and vice versa.
Yeah.
I think that's always just a helpful reminder to realize that you're on the razor's edge a lot of the time, or at least I am. And then the reminder of the fact that assertiveness and speed and kind of willingness to be out there with solutions is something that a lot of people appreciate a lot of the time. But being reminded that because that feels normal to you, it can actually be challenging for other folks. So I've gotten feedback before like, hey, everything you said was great, but slow down. Right. Or like, can we go back to 1? You're now on 5, and repeat that first thing that you said, because it was super valuable. And I'm already past that, right? I'm on to the 5th one. And those types of things are really helpful reminders. Just, we're all in our own heads too much. So a few of those things that, kind of led me back to feedback I'd received before, I think were probably most helpful. And those are the couple buckets I would put them in.
Well, and on that slide with the kryptonite, you made a note there at the bottom in that 4th bullet about, your lack of patience, and, ready to move on to the next thing, getting bored easily. And, so that's a great call out there, because, you've made a choice, you're good with it, whether it is concrete or not. Let's move on. We got a lot to get done.
Yep.
And, if we're going round and round on one point, or you're in a conversation in a networking setting and the subject's not changing, you're going to start tuning out, and you're going to have a hard time remaining engaged.
100%. And the fact that I do that is just a helpful thing to tell people that I'm working with, that like, I have I'm very unconcerned with being right. I tell people a lot. I grew up playing a ton of baseball. That my ideas, if I'm lucky, have a 300 batting average, right? If you're 400, you're a Hall of Famer. But put that in context. That means you're right 3 out of 10 times, right? So like, have an idea, have an opinion, have a perspective, and go move the ball down the field, right? Like,
mixed metaphor alert.
Mixed metaphor alert. 100%. I'm great at those. I love a good Venn diagram as well.
Yeah. Well, I like the idea of, not I like the idea, but I think it's very interesting that you are so self-aware of these traits that you warn people about them. Like, hey, I'm going to grow bored at the subject we're talking about. So if you need my input, like, let's get to it, because I'll be on agenda item 2, 3, or 4 while you were still on 1. And I think that's pretty cool. Will, bring us home.
I'll do it. So we are looking at Devin, talking about what it is that makes him strong, what it is that he suffers with at times, and now he is going to tell us about who he believes he's connected to professionally, that he's networked with, that he may know in some other professional way, could also come on this show and enjoy going through the Q&A with me and John, this analysis, and learn more about themselves. Maybe,
and the tomfoolery. Don't forget the tomfoolery.
Oh, there is tomfoolery.
What do you got, Devin?
I think this has been a very serious, potentially humorless experience. So I'm not sure what you guys are talking
I thought you were going to say life-changing. I'm not quite sure I was ready for humorless.
No, if we need to cut and go back, I can do it again with life-changing.
We one of our production company names that we bantied around was One Take Enterprises, or One Take Productions. So we don't do a lot of go back and edit stuff. We only had one, and I can't say who it was, but it was a guest who started going on about their company, and we had to pull the plug and say, brother, you can't say all that.
Yeah, revealed too much. Yeah.
So that I edited it out for his own good. But I kept the tape and I put it in a zip drive and stashed it away where no one can get it. So if he ever feeds me any rash of you know what, I'm going to bring that one out on him.
I'm kind of disappointed. We haven't found a way to get something cut out of this. Do we need to do some cursing or like what the?
Cursing doesn't bother us.
Let me actually answer your question.
Thank you.
No, I think a great guest for you guys in the future would be Beth Mullaney with Frank and McKenzie, and she's an excellent networker, out and about. Has kind of been in the networking space for a long time, but really has to balance what's I guess a kind of insular world in the kind of finance, CFO, accounting space, with like being the biz dev networking person there that I think is counter to a lot of those characteristics.
That's great nomination.
Yeah,
Not in your head.
Yeah, that's great. She's super cool.
Love it. And that, my friend, brings us to the end of our time together.
To our end of our humorless show.
Our humorless show is over. He's Will Barfield.
I'm John Lane.
And we are
clearly a work in progress.
Clearly a humorless work in progress.
I'm confused.
So are we.
Bye, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Enjoyed it, Devin.
Thank you.
Work in Progress is a podcast presentation of Slipshod Productions. Available on LinkedIn and YouTube. Executive produced and starring John Lane and Will Barfield. Talent booking, production, and editing by John Lane. Thanks for watching. See you next week.